One of the most powerful ways to change the world is through a lens. A single photo can shift the story. What we tend to see in the news and the big media are images showing us who's hurting, war, conflict, drama, and disaster. But the photos don't show us who's helping. Images of those who are helping can reveal heroes in unexpected places and uncover hope where we thought there was none. In this episode of Good Viral, we sit down with Ryan Carter, a humanitarian, photographer, and visual storyteller who has spent years documenting resilience in places like the Dominican Republic of Congo and Ukraine. His work goes beyond capturing conflict. It's about finding the beauty, the strength, and the human spirit in the middle of a crisis. Ryan reminds us that storytelling isn't just about images, it's about impact. The right photo can inspire action, raise support, and bring real change to people who need it most. So if you've ever wondered how you can make a difference or what it looks like when someone truly shows up for the world, this conversation is for you. Stick around. This episode might just change how you see everything. This is Good Viral, and welcome to the conversation. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another podcast episode of Good Viral. Today we have Ryan, who is a wonderful photographer, as you just heard. And we were introduced to Ryan through Malembe Rise. And those of you who have been listening to our podcast for a while, you realize we had interviewed Malembe Rise. And they actually introduced us to Ryan. And Ryan was one of their photographers on site in the Congo. And so we're really excited to talk to you, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited and listen back to that wonderful interview with Sarah. And it's powerful stuff. And I love to connect with people, and wonderful to be here. Great.
Well, I'm glad you listened to that. It's great. It's not coming to this completely blind. But yeah. So it was, as I was talking to you earlier about how Demian and I had never discussed having a photographer on our podcast. And so when Sarah gave us that introduction, it was like, this is a great idea. But also, it kind of got me wondering what led you to focus on photography in specifically humanitarian work with the Congo, the Ukraine, and all these places you've been to. And what was that defining moment in your life that really led you to that avenue?
Yeah, it's one of those interesting things, almost a fall into it sort of story. I'd never really considered myself creative or an artistic person. I'm really bad at art. I can't draw. I can't paint, anything like that. So growing up, I had friends who were these amazing artists, and I had never had that outlet to create, and just always presumed, oh, I'm not a creative person. I'll do something else. And yes, as I sort of grew and what am I going to do with my life? I finished school and deferred my studies for university and went off to Russia, actually, as a missionary and aid worker, and spent almost 4 or 5 years living in Russia and doing a lot of sort of aid work there. And that's kind of where I first started experiencing the world, I guess, outside of my own upbringing, my own culture, my own family. And, as an 18-year-old heading off to another country is quite a big deal. And that was back in 2000. So, of course, it's had dial-up internet and things like that. But connection, of course, was not what it is today. So you're very much out there and just going. And as I saw the work that was being done, and as I saw these amazing places and got to talk to people who were just so different to me and their background and their upbringing, and just starting to hear these stories, it really just showed me that, hey, that there's these stories that I know my friends back home, my family back home, they're never going to have this opportunity, or haven't had this opportunity, or probably won't have this opportunity to go to these places to hear these type of stories and have access or information from something outside of their own little sphere. Yes, you can get a National Geographic or you can read something online, but to have someone that or someone communicate this in a more of a personal way was exciting for me. And, I love that going back home. I'd take a few trips back during that time I was living there, and to be able to tell people and share some of the stories and just the crazy things that happens when you're traveling internationally, and those difference in cultures and the mistakes that you make and the funny things that happen, and to be able to share all that, as well as the stories of, kids in orphanages and working in rehab centers and with homeless, and situations that, yes, we don't have a lot of in Australia. We have a pretty good social system, and that's not as big a problem. And you go to a country like Russia, and that's a huge problem. And to be able to go and share the realities of that with family, with friends, with church groups, with organizations. I guess it really started to develop that storytelling heart in me and really wanting to share those stories. And that sort of grew a bit further into photography. Briefly with that, my grandfather passed away when I was in Russia. I wasn't able to get back for the funeral or anything like that. No, we got back like 9 months later. And as the family had sort of, given little bits and pieces around, and I got back, and the one thing waiting for me from my granddad was an old camera, an old film camera and a couple of lenses. And at this stage, I had no interest really in photography or anything, but I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. So I taught myself to use that and really saw that as a complement of the storytelling I was starting to love and starting to grow into, and seeing how impactful and powerful an image is. And how that really complements a story. So if you have a story and then you have an image that really shows that, people engage on such a deeper level through the power of an image. So I sort of just taught myself that and grew from there, and I've done a lot of travel, a lot of other missions work, aid work, humanitarian work, and sort of taken the photography with me in those travels. And it's sort of grown from there to connecting with different organizations and different ministries and different groups, and seeing a valuable need for storytelling and for dynamic storytelling that really engages an audience, and how people can use that to grow their services, grow their mission, grow what they're doing. Yeah, I mentioned just before we started there as well, how there's so many people doing so many amazing things, but storytelling communications isn't necessarily their strong point. And we can't expect someone to be able to do everything. You can run a child feeding nutrition program in Africa, but that doesn't mean you're a good storyteller, or that you have the time or the capability and capacity to tell those stories and share those stories. But without sharing it, how do you connect with an audience? How do you get the support that you need? We all know what it's like trying to raise support in NGO fields and living off other people's generosity and donations and just fundraising for a program, and being able to help with that is a really wonderful thing. And it really hits me quite personally how much you can impact another group or another organization by offering the services that I do.
Right. So so when we talk about storytelling, I'm sort of thinking that you probably have lots of stories, but you probably also have your favorite ones. And so maybe can you share with us something that's somewhere along the way sort of paint a picture? Because of course you're a photographer, but here you're going to have to use your words and sort of paint a picture for us in terms of what was the setting and what happened, and what is it that made it significant for you. Really, I think that Good Viral, what we're all about really is, of course, trying to help others. And so the good impact that we can have as individuals if we just make that effort, if we just try. So can you share that connection with us? What happened for you? Something that was special for you?
One thing that comes to mind, I've been pushing along trying to get this going for a while, and I went back to study photography and did a commercial photography school, and just trying to work out where I'm going with my career, what I'm doing, how this is going to work. And I'd met a guy called Puppy Orion. He's a Congolese guy, and I'd met him when we were living in Sweden together for a short period, a few months in Sweden, and I talked to him, and he had this amazing story of his life growing up in Congo, having to flee violence. And he walked from Congo to South Africa as a 12-year-old kid. His family gave him the direction, just go, because there's no life for you here. So he had to flee his home, everything he knew as like a 12-year-old child. And long story, won't go into that now, but we met with him and talked with him, and we sort of grew our friendship and stuff over quite a few years. And in 2014, he invited me to go to the Congo with him. And so this is sort of really, I'm starting to, what am I doing in my photography? Where am I going? I love stories. I love the stories that I find in this NGO world, and where there's people actually helping. I'd done some work in commercial photography. It's interesting. I enjoyed it, but it didn't have that depth of story. There was not that real feeling of value that what I do can actually help someone. And that's what I really craved. And so Puppy invited me to go to Congo with him. He's from Bukavu in the Eastern Congo, which, I'm sure a lot of your readers now are aware that your listeners, sorry, not your readers, are aware that that's a very nice place right at the moment, especially like there's a lot going on. Goma's just been taken over by the rebel group and stuff. And yeah, bad situation. So I went with him. It was my first Africa trip actually, and definitely my first time in Congo, and first time to a place that was considered a war zone and a do not travel sort of travel place, and went with a lot of trepidation, a lot of excitement, but a lot of trepidation. I remember sitting on the airplane just thinking, what did I get myself into? This probably wasn't a smart idea. I have a wife, I have 2 children. What am I doing? But I landed, got there, and just really experienced that, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners and a lot of organizations, they have this. You get to a place and you hear all the bad stuff, Congo, rape capital of the world, and 6 million people have been killed and countless million displaced, and just all the statistics. And you hear those statistics and you get there and think, wow, people are so friendly. People are so wonderful. There's a lot of hardship here, and you don't discount that and you don't take that away from the situation. But my personal experience was a wonderful one, getting to meet people and sit and talk with people and meet them alongside Puppy, who's Congolese. Of course, he speaks the language and has that. And we had that friendship that really got us deeper into that. And just going around, he's actually started an organization called Focus Congo. And so working under that umbrella was kind of my real first opportunity to work really closely with an NGO, especially a grassroots level NGO like that, which was just fantastic because he knew so many people and people knew him. And they do a lot of stuff throughout education, medical care, packets of food they give out, working with orphanages. They do a whole range of stuff. But one thing that really stood out to me, and it was just highlighted later on, the value of what I do. There's a little hospital called Chai Hospital in a notoriously bad region of Bukavu, the city that we're in Eastern Congo. And we went to this hospital where one of Puppy's friends was the director of the hospital. And you go to a hospital like that is so underfunded, that is so ill-equipped, they don't have electricity. I remember giving my torch to the staff there to use overnight to deliver babies because they had no electricity, and they used my torch to do this overnight. Like, it just really strikes home, like, wow, this is amazing. These people are doing the best that they can, and it's a huge struggle for them. And no one should be without just those bare necessities of having electricity in the operating room to give birth, or to do surgery, or having a hospital bed. You go into a ward and there's just people laying on the ground because they don't even have a bed or a mattress to sleep in. And I remember photographing and just walking around this hospital with Puppy and getting to talk to some of the mostly women who were in there, but some of the other patients and some of the doctor's staff, and taking photos of the hospital, of the conditions in the hospital and of the equipment they have, but also taking photos of the work that they were doing, that, it's not all bad. Like, these people, they know they don't have the best equipment, yet they give 100% of who they are, of what they are, to help and serve their community. So we spent time there, of course, and moved on, did a lot of other things on that trip. And then it was maybe a year or two later, talking with Puppy, and they were fundraising for this particular hospital. They wanted to get the conditions improved and really improve what was going on there. And they used a lot of my photos for that. And those articles went out in the German, because Puppy lives in Germany now. He's married to a German girl. And they had articles going out in the newspaper, and all these different ways they were communicating, social media and stuff as well. And using these images was a big part to them being able to raise funds. And I think they raised 250, 300,000 euros for this hospital, and had other hospitals donate things like x-ray machines and stuff like that, which we ended up shipping to Congo. And knowing that my imagery was able to, we could communicate the needs, but, needs statistics, they hit a certain amount of people and to a certain level. But when you can really communicate a face and a story behind those statistics, behind those needs, people feel a complete different connection to the project. And they have this empathy that you don't get through just a statistic or a number or a need. And to see that actually not just be presented, but to see it follow through to having people actually give and hospitals donate, and to see go back to Chai Hospital now, and they're so well equipped, and they have generators, and they have clean water stations set up, and they have tanks to store water, and this whole, hospital beds and a fully equipped surgical room and stuff like that is in part through the photos and the stories that we could tell from our first visit there. And that really struck home to me. It's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is where there's value. I can bring something in that I can do, and it makes a huge difference to my life. And more so than that, makes a huge difference to the life of the people there.
Like an accidental success story, basically. It's right. That's really fantastic.
Happy accident for sure.
That's,
as you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of when I was going onto your LinkedIn, actually, and you recently posted this image. On this LinkedIn post, you have this image, and I'll show it here on the screen for those who are listening. It's a beautiful image of a person in yellow with yellow face paint, if I'm remembering correctly off the top of my head. And then in the background as well, it's kind of like this yellow sunset. It's just so beautiful and captivating. And then I saw your words that you put with this image on that post. And if you're okay with it, I said, all right, if I read a little bit of that.
Of course.
Okay. With this image, you said, how many times must the Congolese fight just to exist? How many lives must be sacrificed before someone, anyone, decides this is unacceptable? Congo is music. It's dance. It's laughter, color, and beauty that defies logic. It should be known for these things, not just its wars, not just its suffering. And yet, here we are, again, and still the people of Goma do what they've always done. They endure. But how much longer must they do it alone? And I was like, what? Poetry?
Yeah.
But also, how true. We're taking a quick pause, and we'll get back to Ryan's interview in a moment. If you're feeling moved, inspired, or even curious, follow that feeling. Head over to ryancarterimages.com to see the powerful stories he's captured through his lens. You can also follow Ryan on Instagram at ryancarterimages, where his feed is filled with real faces, real hope, and the kind of storytelling that moves people into action. Remember, the world changes when we choose to see it differently. Go take a look and share what moves you. Now, back to the conversation. And, Demian and I have been having recently deep conversations about perception and the perception of how people view these parts of the world. In the Congo, you've had some work in the Ukraine as well, as I saw on your website. And these are places of high conflict and high controversy. And, with that and going to these places, I'm sure it's shifted some of your perspective as well. And so what have you learned with taking images and seeing these stories where there's a balance between struggle, resilience, and hope?
What a wonderful question. The thing that really strikes me with these places is, I touched on it about my first trip to Congo, sitting on the airplane and you're hearing the statistics. And it seems like with the Ukraine war now, there's so much going on, especially with the, what's going on in America and Trump and how that affects the Ukraine situation. And you hear these huge, the big picture, there's billions of dollars involved and there's all this, how it all ties together, all of Europe, the whole world, World War III. Yeah, it's so easy to get lost in the numbers and in the big picture of a huge geopolitical incident. What strikes me is when you get to the ground level, when you get to that grassroots in Congo, it can be in Nepal, in the Himalayas, it's in Ukraine. You talk to someone, say, take Ukraine, for example. And last year I was in the Dnipro region around the Pokrovsk area, which is now the front lines. And you're talking to people who are evacuating and leaving their home. When you get to talk to someone whose whole life has been upended, they had no say in this. They don't care about the geopolitical struggles of, how much, what influence America has or China has or Europe has or, what Putin's doing. They just want to survive. They're just like us. They're like you and me. They have families. They want the best for their children. They just want to live their life. And when you can highlight and impact a personal individual story that shows that this person has to deal with the absolute worst that humanity can throw their way, and yet they survive and they endure and they go on, it takes it away from being this big geopolitical issue that I can't solve. I have no power to solve this problem. But what can I do? I can help this one individual, this one person's life. We can evacuate them from the front lines. We can get them a safe, warm place to stay where they have food, where their family's looked after, where they're away from the immediate risk of death. And they have a place where they can firstly survive and then hopefully move into thrive and actually grow from there. And same in Congo. The Congolese issue's been going on for so long. It's like their whole history is pain, just a very, very dark history. But when you go to one person's life and you can see what a organization like Focus Congo or like Malemba Rise in Kinshasa, what they're doing with these children, that can change one life. One of these little children, their life through the club of leaders can be completely turned around, and that will impact their family, impact their community, hopefully in the future impact their country. But if not, if it impacts just them and just their family, then that's worth doing. And that's how I can get involved. That's how you can get involved. That's how every single individual can get involved, is by caring about an individual. Like, we don't need to think about these issues on the grand political stages of the world, because that's not how most of us operate. That's not where most of us have influence. but we have influence in our own families, in our own communities. We have influence where we can spend our money, who we can give our money to, and what organizations we can donate to. Like, we don't need to wait for USAID to do everything for us. We can do that. We have our own agency and we can help other people. And I think that's where it's really struck home to me through the work I do, is getting to meet people on the ground of these huge, huge issues like the war in Ukraine, and, it's war in Europe for the first time since World War II, right? It's such a huge thing. And of course, I lived in Ukraine for 5 years. I have a lot of really close friends there. I have a lot of people there still, and I've lost people through this war. So it's a very personal thing for me. But I can have that personal connection with individuals, and I don't have to see it on this big scheme that this is too big. We can't fix this problem, but it can be something that we can actually make a difference. If we pull together as humans, we can actually make a difference in individual lives, and hope, we can work, of course, however we can to help influence bigger situations. And I hope that through my photography, we can influence policy. We can influence other things as well. But I do know that we can 100% influence people's perceptions, and storytelling is something that it breaks down the whole fake news. It breaks down, well, this isn't true, that's not true, he says, she says. Once you get someone's personal story, personal testimony, that's something that's irrefutable. This is their personal experience that we can share. And that can go out from there to really impact people, because there's no, where's our billions of dollars going? Who's getting this? Where's the corruption? Whatever that is, that's irrelevant when you get down to one individual person's story of having their home completely destroyed. The city that they grew up in no longer exists. Their family members have been killed or captured or are living in the occupation right now. To hear those stories, it takes it from something that we can't understand to something that we can, and that we can relate to. We can put ourselves in that story and think, man, if I wasn't born in Australia, I could have been born in a little village in Eastern Congo, or I could have been born on, the Cross region area of Ukraine. Like, it's just by chance that I happen to be in Australia, but we can still put ourselves and understand that context of the struggle that someone can go through at a personal level. And I think that helps us to make change when we can understand it. And I think that's what storytelling is, really being able to put a story in front of someone in a way they can understand and can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's, we'll of course link this for everybody to check it out, right? Ryan Carter Images. I encourage our listeners to look at some of these images, because what strikes me is it's hard to understand, really, because I think about the growing up in news stories, and they always, as they flash by world news, somehow they're all the same. No matter where they are in the world, it's almost like you get this. It's sort of like an endless stream of bad things in the world, and somehow looking at your images, it's you see real people. You look at their faces, and there might be, you can see that maybe the setting is different than where you live, or, but you look at the eyes, and somehow it seems real. It seems like you're there with them. And I think that that's the big difference. And what I don't understand is how it is that you have, obviously professionals that are working for these news agencies. Somehow they seem to not capture that. And I don't understand why. Maybe other people out there smarter than I have an idea why that is. But for you, it seems that you've really made the decision that you want to, like you said, to help individuals, to connect with individuals, to share these stories. And it's probably, you're not at the end of it, you're in the middle of it, right? It's something that you started and that you're continuing to do. So can you share with us maybe how this has impacted your life in a way that was unexpected, maybe an unexpected lesson, something that just I'm assuming that you feel like what you're doing is right for you. What kind of lessons brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think I've always I grew up in a Christian home. I went to church, had these very sort of Christian morals and values in my life. And so that's been a big part of who I am, but also just, a wonderful family and a caring family. Like, my parents would always be there to give to other people and to help other people. And saw that growing up as a child, that they were always open and willing to help. And it's just something I sort of grew up with that was normal. And it's something that in the work I do now as well, to help people. Like, you touched on the difference in photos and that impact. And I think that's something that for me, it's caring. Like, I have to care about the people I'm photographing. And to do that, you have to be emotionally involved, and you can't just disconnect and go into a situation, photograph what you see, because to do that, you're just photographing a scene. You're just replicating what's there. But to really tell someone's story, you need to know someone. I can't tell your story without knowing who you are, anything about you. And the only way you can get to know someone is by sitting and listening to them. And you sit and listen to them, you talk with them, and you understand a bit of who they are. And I think that only grows you as a human being. You need to be vulnerable, and it's not an easy place to be in, where you're hearing a lot of negative stories. You hear a lot of trauma. Some of the things, I remember sitting my first trip in Congo and hearing these women who had been caught and had spent time as prisoners of war, basically slaves and stuff in the jungle, and hearing their stories and thinking, how can human beings possibly do that to another human being? And you see that in Ukraine, and how the amount of money and the amount of effort and technology that the world has created to kill and hurt each other is shocking. So I don't know how I got on that little tangent, but
I don't think it's a tangent. I think you're right on. Yeah. Yes.
It's having that empathy for people, right? And caring, just literally caring about someone's, like, I don't ever want to be that person who just goes to Congo to get a nice picture. If that's who I end up being, then I no longer should be doing this job. The only reason I go is to actually make a difference. And, I don't want to just be that person who goes in to, get something pretty, just create something for the sake of creating it. I want to be able to make a change. If I can't do that, if I can't go in and help an organization and really bring support in, bring funding in, bring something in, and actually make a tangible difference through my work, then I'm just another person there who's taking up space. So I think that's a passion that I've got, is to really get involved in every organization that I work with, every story that I tell. I'm personally deeply involved in that. And I want to know that person. I want to know what happens to that person after I leave. Like, I want to, the beauty of my work, say with Malemba Rise, I've been back to Congo twice now with them. And my first trip was back in 2022. And then we were back there again late last year. And to see some of those same children at their school, that they were so much younger, and to see them now, to see how they've developed, to see how the program's developed, and to have that sort of follow up of, wow, it's not just I've taken these pictures of these kids, but who knows what happens to them afterwards. That it's like, hey, we took this picture of these kids 2 years ago when this program was just starting. And now we can see how much they've thrived, how it's impacted their community, the change that's happened in that school, the change that's happened in that community because of the work of the Club of Leaders and Malemba Rise. And to be able to visually tell that story, that's so impactful for me. And it's about creating those relationships, not only with the people that I'm photographing, but the organizations who are doing this work, right? So being able to connect with them. And yeah, to go back to your initial question, Damien, that's what it is for me. It's having that connection with people. It's finding value there and becoming vulnerable in every photo that I take. Like, it's really is a piece of me that's being put into these photos, because I feel so connected to people when I'm photographing them, that I really am putting a bit of my heart and my soul into the pictures. And hopefully I'm glad to hear that comes out, that when you look at my imagery, you can see that in that, you can see a real heart in the photos. It's something I've always steered away from, that photojournalistic war photographer type thing. Like I conflict areas are not easy to go into, but if I'm going to be there, I want to share a story of hope. Congo is such a perfect example of this. There's such a bad past, you search. I remember before my first trip to Congo, I typed in Congo in Google or Bukavu or wherever it was that I was going. And it took me 6 pages of scrolling through news articles before I found anything positive. It was all negative, about the war, about minerals, about blood diamonds, about rape, about everything was negative. And that image that you referred to before of the lady on the rocks whose face painted, that's part of a project that I started with my good friend Papi called Kitoko Oyo. And in Lingala, Kitoko Oyo means this beauty. And we'd seen so much negativity. We wanted to try and change that narrative. So we started this project ourselves to tell a positive, hopeful story of the beauty of Congo. Like, yes, there's so much trial, there's so much pain, there's so much hardship, but there's so much beauty in this country. And we want people to think of Congo and think of the beauty, not to think of the war. We don't want people to think of the precious lives that are there, not the precious lives that have been massacred. When people think of Congo, how do we change that narrative that people were thinking, this is a place that has hope. This is a place worth fighting for, worth putting effort into, worth being there. And I think it's easy for us to give up on places like that, which have such a depth of issues involved and so many, so many militia groups and the army and outside influences. There's so much going on there. You can't understand the situation. It's easy just to think there's no point. I can't do anything. I can't change anything. But when people have hope and they see beauty in there, that yes, this is worth investing in this country. This is worth investing in these programs. This is worth investing in these people. Then that's a powerful thing to do. So that project was something that we really pushed for. And we had these ambassadors. Cherry was that lady on the rock, and she's an artist, and she's a women's and children's rights activist, and really pushes for rights of children and women, which, is a very rare thing in Congo. And the work that she does and the way she does that through visual arts and is just so amazing. And she was one of our main ambassadors for the project, and be able to tell her story and share her heart behind that, and just to bring a bit of hope into a hopeless situation, and that's what I love. In Ukraine, I work with an organization called Children New Generation. And yeah, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of horrible stuff going on right now in Ukraine, but to see this organization not only evacuating people from the front lines, but they have a child center for children with disabilities and autism that they're growing to help support families where, in Ukraine, historically, disability is something that people try and ignore. They lock their children away at home. They don't want anyone to know that they have this, but this is an organization now in the heart of this war that is growing a center with specialists in there to help teach the children, but also teach the families how to cope, how to behave, how to work through the problems that they have and not just ignore them. And to see these sort of hopeful stories going on in the midst of war is a beautiful thing, and this is the stories that we want to share, that we want to get out there. And that's what's impacted me so much. As that question that you asked, what's impacted me? This is what's impacted me, is people doing amazing things and being able to share that positivity and share hope through what others would consider a hopeless situation.
If you've made it this far, you know Good Viral is all about spotlighting people and organizations who are actually making a difference, like Charity Water, Gorilla Doctors, Rainforest Action Network, and so much more. To keep doing that, we'd love your support. Become a Good Viral member at goodviral.org and help us grow this mission. Starting in August, members will get early access to episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes content with our guests, deeper dives into articles, and abilities to join us live during the interviews to ask your own questions in the chat. If you believe in the power of stories to inspire action, come be part of it. Join us at goodviral.org/memberships. Our motto always has been and always will be, when good goes viral, the world gets better. Thank you for being part of the conversation.
Well said, Ryan.
Thank you. I felt like that went on a bit. I'm sorry.
No,
it's good.
Soaking it up, really. That was great. No, Demi and I have had conversations about this so many times, and you touched on it. And I feel that at least the three of us in this room have a little bit of a commonality where we get to see or converse with what we feel are heroes in the world and get to hear the stories and see the stories about what they do and the transformations that do occur. Another touch on what you see based off of what you search. Searching Congo, you come across 6 pages of nastiness, In terms of that, I feel like responsibilities of photographers like yourself, as well as photojournalists, and what they have for documenting crisis situations, as well as telling stories. Is it all bad, or is there goodness to save? And I think that's, as you touched on, that's incredibly important. So thank you for commenting on that. And I know a lot of people who are listening to this are going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is wonderful, because you're amazing, Ryan. And all the people you've talked about are fantastic. But there's still this overall feeling of, what can I do to help? Right? These are questions I get all the time because of this podcast. People have started calling me, asking me, where do I go to find these resources? What can I do to help to solve this problem? Whether it's through funds or through sharing or through volunteering. What would you suggest for someone who's feeling disconnected? I think that was another piece you mentioned, basically, was we're all feeling very disconnected to the problem, and we're not feeling connected to the story. So what would you suggest for people who feel disconnected from these global issues and these stories, and how can they take meaningful action?
Yeah, that's a great point. A great question too. And I think for me, I always try and tell people to learn, to educate themselves on situations, because we have such little knowledge of a lot of these things that are going on. And yes, that's easier said than done. And it's hard to find good information about things, but look at different organizations that are doing good work, through your podcast, you can connect to organizations where you hear a little bit from people who are there doing that work, right? And you get to hear that. And I think it's easy to feel almost a guilt that I should be doing more. So I want to give money or I want to support something. And so I just give out of that reason. And I think that's something that I know I want to help people to get away from that feeling of guilt. I don't want people to give just because they want to feel better for themselves. I think, it's a big part of what I've done in the Congo as well, is to help people to see that we can invest into Congo. And I think that's a big change of mindset, is that a lot of these aid organizations, a lot of the NGOs, they don't want people just to give. They want people to invest. So they want people to donate some of their time, that even if it's just their mental capacity to actually thinking and looking about this situation, understanding a little bit about it. So around the cooler at work, sitting in a meeting at work, they can actually share something of the organization that they're given some money to. So it's something that I think people need to put a little bit of time into. Like, I don't think people should just give just for the sake of giving. Of course, organizations don't mind that either, because money is so needed. But I think it's so much more valuable, both for you as a person and for the organization, for people to invest. And that means research. That means listening to podcasts like yours, where you're talking to these organizations and seeing what's actually going on, where that money's going, and reaching out to people, whether it's like people emailing you, people emailing me. You find someone on Instagram or LinkedIn who's doing something, send them a message and say, what are you actually doing? How can I help? And where will that go? If I send you $100, what's that going to be used for? Like, ask questions and feel free to, most people enjoy talking about the projects and the work that they're doing. At least in my experience with NGOs, if you give NGO worker the opportunity to share about the project they're doing, you won't get them to shut up. Like, they love what they're doing. They're so passionate about what they're doing. So give them the opportunity to talk, give them the opportunity to share, invite them to a work lunch meeting or to your church group meeting or whatever it is. Invest in understanding a situation. Invest in hearing from someone who actually has been there or is from there. Get a Ukrainian into your circle to come and share about Ukraine. Don't get it from the news or just a YouTube video. I'm sure there's a Ukrainian in your community somewhere who you can invite and who are more than willing to come and share their personal experiences of their home. Same with Congo. Get someone from Nepal to come and share about their experiences of the earthquake issues that happened years ago and stuff. Tell that and get the understanding of the story from someone who's lived that story, not from someone who's just sharing a story. And I think that's a great way to really connect with an organization and a purpose. And then from there, your desire and the way that you can actually help is way more impactful. And I think that's a way to really get involved and to do something meaningful with your money, your voice, your whatever it is that you want to give to an organization. That's the way to do it, to actually make an impact.
This conversation has really, I don't know what this is saying it the right way, but exceeded my expectations of what was going to happen with this podcast, because I feel like you're just talking about how your personal experience from the beginning, sort of accidental success, and sort of your commitment to helping others and sharing about real people, real stories. That just the way that you explain that, it's like a lesson. I feel like I was sort of hanging on every word, because I was thinking that this is really what people need to pay closer attention to inside of themselves, right? Because I think that, most people really do have a desire to help others, and a lot of times they don't take action, they don't do anything. And I think that once they start connecting with others who actually need help, and actually start forming those friendships, those connections with other people, other families, other individuals that are maybe unlike them, that usually it leads to a one thing after another. And I think that it's a huge growing experience for people. And it's sort of, I think that what you've said, and so I guess what I'm really saying is thank you for sharing, because what you've said, I think really captures that's what's happened to you. But also I want to reinforce that that's important. And I think it can happen for so many people. So I'm just going to encourage them to connect with you and your website, your images, your ideas, your lessons, and say that, hey, there's it's a fulfilling life to help other people and to get in there and see the beauty where normally people only see suffering, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
So that's a
And
great
I think
lesson.
it's something to
Thank you.
touch on as well, just quickly, is that it's not all just an international far off other side of the world type of thing. Like there's programs, there's services, there's things going on in your neighborhood, in your city, I'm sure everywhere around the world. I get
Right.
to work part-time here in Australia with an organization called Uniting Communities. And it's just a local not-for-profit that does so many amazing things in the community, from homeless support to Lifeline suicide hotline. There's disability things across the board touching on social services. And you don't need to go far, far, far away to help someone. Look for those needs, look for those things in your local community, your next door neighbor, your city. There's things out there everywhere you can get involved into.
Oh, great point.
I kind of want to touch real quickly as we kind of close our conversation here, but you mentioned a lot about investing in the Congo. And I love using that word, and investing is that it really changes how the approach can be for people. In terms of like, I used to be in sales quite a bit, and so is Demian. And so we would always, tell people to invest in yourself, right? To invest in your future, right? But we don't really think about investing in the world that we want. I think to invest in a world you wish to live in is something worth doing. And that includes Congo within our world. It includes Ukraine that's in our world. It includes, if not all, humans. And so to have that caring nature, as you mentioned as well, is the driving force behind the investment. And I think I'm going to start changing my language from necessarily saying donation to investing into a world you wish to live in. So I just kind of want to leave that with our audience to think about in how you wish to invest into your future world, into your future life, and into your identity of who you are. And if that's compelling you to go and follow Ryan on Instagram, I suggest that, but also to contribute to the investment towards these organizations that we've mentioned, and to follow Ryan and encourage him moving forward. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being part of this podcast. It was mind-blowing, as every episode is. I say this every time, but it was an unexpected surprise to come from a photography industry to say all these amazing things and to hear all these amazing stories. So it's just a great blessing to have you on this podcast. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do to also help show and highlight people's work and the needs and the opportunities to invest in people around the world. Like, these organizations are doing amazing work, and it's people like you, people like me, who we could have the opportunity to share these stories, and what you do is amazing. So thank you for that. It's been such a wonderful morning talking with you, and I've really appreciated the opportunity.
Well, it's our pleasure. Yes.
Thank you for listening to the Good Viral podcast and being part of the conversation. If you are inspired by this episode, go to our website at goodviral.org, where you can find resources and listings from the episode to continue good efforts.
Like, comment, and share this episode to any or all of your social media channels. It's really easy to take a small action, and maybe you'll inspire a big result.
When good goes viral, the world gets better.